Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime in Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's right, and you can just call me Fuego for short, and I cordially welcome you once more to Hail to Stephen King on the Horror Show. I've been doing this for over 3 years, over 200 episodes, but I don't know if it's ever felt as weird as it does today, because of the fact that, I've been essentially trapped in this home for a few days now. And no, it's not because of, that or anything of that nature, but just, social distancing, self-quarantining for fear of encountering whatever. It's a weird world right now. My day job decided to, at this hotel that I work at here in Phoenix, Arizona, decided to, put a large chunk of their staff on hold, essentially, because all of these different laws of, everything from food to large gatherings, because I work with food, beverage, entertainment, and so events and stuff like that. And since nobody is allowed to congregate, all concerts are canceled in most areas of the United States and the world, I would imagine, at this particular point. We were set to do press for the Phoenix Film Festival at the end of this month. That has been postponed. I saw Cannes was just recently postponed. Entire concert tours are either being postponed or canceled. The movie theaters are closed. God damn, the world is weird, man. And so, some people, some personas, might be starting to feel a little stir crazy if you have been essentially locked up at your house for, most if not all hours of the day for fear of encountering somebody who might have the dreaded 19. And so that's about where we're at. And, as somebody who is a, creative of sorts and being at home, of course, for the last day or two, I've been keeping myself busy and trying to get a new set together as best I can. But the problem is I had this badass chair that I was about to purchase, and then all these closures and all this stuff starts going down. So that wasn't going to happen. Have to budget your money a little bit better, obviously. And, wash hands and, don't make unnecessary trips and stuff like that. I got a little ire for doing that the other day, which is interesting. But, this is all important stuff as we see the escalation of everything. But I'm not here to talk about that because I did a whole video about that last week live, which was essentially the apocalyptic stories of Stephen King. Talked about The Stand, talked about Cell, so on and so forth. But this week I was like, trapped, essentially. So how about we talk about the trapped tales of Stephen King, where you're essentially like some of the... I'm going to run down some of the scariest situations that pop up in a few stories, but then also just premises in general for entire novels. So this is the novel edition of Stephen King's Trapped Tales. Now there will be a second companion video that is all about shorter tales, so you're going to notice two ostensibly omitted stories in this, and you're gonna be like, what the hell, man? Where's the Langoliers? Where's the Mist? Well, there's a second video that's gonna cover stuff like that, and the raft, and maybe even night surf. And so I also have that list together. So this was actually a print article that I'm putting together that I'm also shopping around to Fangoria, Bloody Disgusting, a few other pieces and places and such. But let's just jump right into it, as everybody likes to say, guys. I've had time to watch a lot more YouTube videos in the last couple days. So, Trapped Tales of Stephen King. How can I not start with the story that put Stephen King on the map? And so it doesn't have a full-on premise of being trapped, But goddamn does, a large portion of the finale feel absolutely frightening, because this is Carrie. I'm trapped in a burning gym. Just, our girl has gone bonkers, berserk, and she has all this pig's blood on her, and this is where Carrie goes off the rails and finally just gives in to, the craziness, teetering on the edge. Well, this is what pushes her off, and so she essentially starts going, all crazoid on these kids, and this fire that has started in the gym, and she locks everybody in, and I mean, that's definitely to be burned alive in a gym, and then some kids are trampled by each other in, an effort to escape, and it's a horrible scenario, and it's definitely one of Stephen King's most iconic, is girl covered in blood, just like destroying this gym and killing all of these kids who are trapped at the high school prom. It's really, really scary stuff to think about. And then obviously The Shining. The Shining might be the one that, as far as just the whole scenario being about, stuck in the winter and trapped, just a small family. But what do you do if your father, your husband, is starting to lose it himself from the isolation? And not just the isolation, but, also the fact that you are trapped in a place that has all of this evil residual spiritual presence, obviously, that is in turn manipulating father into, some acts that we all know. Acts, not in the actual source material, if we're going to get fair about it. Yes, it was changed to an axe by Kubrick. Anybody who has seen the ABC remake miniseries or has read the source material for The Shining, yes, it's this big, like, croquet mallet. But nonetheless, that would have to be insanely frightening. It's a lot more frightening for, a situation that was already kind of strained when you were coming to the Overlook with hopes of, everything getting a little bit better, some isolation from the booze and, all this other different stuff. But lo and behold, it doesn't work out so well for the Torrance family. Then next up, we have another iconic one. This is Cujo, trapped in a car with a rabid dog outside. Yeah, that's another scenario that doesn't make up the entirety of the book, because we do know that, Cujo kills, the sheriff, who was working on stuff beforehand, Bannerman, I should say, who, worked on getting Frank Dodd and everything, along with Johnny Smith and, the Dead Zones, Cy King's previous novel before that. And so that's obviously a scary, like Cujo kills a few people before he gets to the iconic scenario of the cheating wife and her young boy being stuck in this car in this, like, junkyard area of sorts. It's either a junkyard or a farm kind of area. I believe it's a farm kind of area. Anyway, lo and behold, they are stuck in this car with this rabid, rabies-infested Saint Bernard that is basically terrorizing them outside, trying to get in. And spoilers, we do know that in the source material, as opposed to in the film, kid survives. It's a little bit different than the actual novel. So, jumping ahead just a wee bit, of course, we have to also mention Misery, which I put as trapped in a remote home as hostage of your number one fan. I'm your number one fan. Yeah, good times, Annie Wilkes, good times. And I mean, yeah, boy, for this poor author, man, he's driving around in Colorado, so we're sticking to Colorado. Isn't that irony for you? And yeah, man, I just, you have to sympathize in this situation with, just being strapped to a bed, injured from a car accident, and then being forced to write, And the whole being forced to write part, this was actually a little very quick honorable mention. I think the scenario we get in the dark half at the very end, where you're essentially, trapped with your evil alter ego and forced to write, which is what happens at the end, where, okay, you were gonna write me back into existence. It's the same thing that, Wilkes wants for Misery, in that novel. And so, I mean, those are just two that I felt like they were close enough, in a reference and mention and just the fright. But I mean, really the whole number one fan thing, you also have to give just a brief little nod to Lisi's story too, because, Lacey gets basically, held hostage briefly at the end of that book by her husband's #1 fan, who is also a crazoid. So, I mean, these are themes that King has obviously returned to at times, and even the trapped isolation aspect a little bit of Secret Window, Secret Garden, some people could probably even, argue, but once again, if I was going to have that on a list, wink, wink, that would most definitely be for, the forthcoming companion video, which is going to be entitled Trapped Tales of Stephen King, the Shorts. So that is going to be the sequel video to this. But moving right along, this is another one that I personally really enjoy. A lot of people have mixed feelings about, but the Tommyknockers, which I described as trapped in a town as the only one not under an alien spaceship's control, which is really what happens to Guard, man. I mean, everybody else in the town has essentially been either done away with or is under control of this spaceship that, that his love, Bobby, love / best friend, I guess, of sorts, the only one who really cares about him in the midst of all of his constant stupid decision making and stuff like that. On and off lovers, but terrific friends, and yet it's this steel plate in his head from this injury that, just leaves him to be the only cognizant person still in this town as they are trying to unearth the rest of the ship. People are changing more and more from this pseudo radiation poisoning that is emanating from this ship. It's a little long in the tooth, but I love the Tommyknockers because I love when King tries to implement science fiction into his storytelling, and just to be trapped in a town and to be the only one who's cognizant of what's really going on, but yet still have to fake like you're part of it. It's really interesting, the trapped predicament that Guard finds himself in. And if it's been a little while since you've revisited the Tommyknockers, not the miniseries. Not the miniseries with Tracy Lords, my God. Although I do think Jimmy Smits and the woman who plays Bobby are both pretty good, but the production value, everything else, I'm so glad that James Wan is spearheading that remake. But in this world right now, this weird world of ours, who the hell knows when that could possibly begin shooting. But let's jump ahead. Have to have Gerald's Game on here, because imagine being trapped, chained to a bed, alone in a remote cabin. Yeah, and to boot, your husband is dead on the ground there. He's a little bit more studly in Mike Flanagan's film as opposed to being the porky, slimy lawyer that you have in the book. But, I mean, Gerald's Game is one of Flanagan's best, it's one of his best films, and in my estimation, it's one of the best Cy King adaptations that we have ever had. It's really awesome. Carla Gugino does just an amazing performance in that. I mean, you've probably seen her also in The Haunting of Hill House. She has her goodies on display very prominently in Sin City. She's terrific in that as Marv's lawyer. But regardless of how beautiful she is, she's a terrific actress, and she owns this movie. And the book is terrific as well. It's kind of a mirror sister book to Dolores Claiborne, which is actually seeing a 25th anniversary this month, and you can look forward to a 25th anniversary review of the movie with a terrific Kathy Bates performance in that own right, as well as Jennifer Jason Leigh. It's great in that too. So, but nonetheless, Gerald's Game, and how she has to escape from the trap that she is in, just handcuffed to this bed. I mean, ripping of wrists, and that scene with the tendons, man, in Flanagan's film, whew, God, it haunts my nightmares. It's horrible. So now we're going to jump down to what's kind of like, there's two main things that I'm referencing here, but there's also two others where it's just kind of pertinent to mention this scenario. But this is both Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, or as it was abbreviated in the film, Shawshank Redemption, and then The Green Mile. Which is ironic that Darabont directed both of these because they both have a similar scenario. Imagine being trapped in prison for a crime you didn't commit. Yeah, it's a horrible feeling, and it happens in The Outsider too. Which everybody, he only gets to the jail portion of it originally, at least in the series or stuff. But and we're not spoiling stuff. We're not going into it. And then even The Eyes of the Dragon, being framed for the murder of your father and locked away in this tower for years and years and years. I mean, this is a theme that King obviously finds fascinating, but how horrible would that be? This is the thing that I'm trying to put forth with this video, is that okay, yeah, you could be locked away in your home, self-quarantined, social distancing, hiding away. Because I know here in the United States, we're got a few thousand cases at this point. I know it's creeping into the higher thousands, numbers escalating every day. But, you know, I'm well aware it's a lot worse in places like Spain, Italy, you know, China leveling out a little bit. But that, once again, we're not here to talk about this. I'm just here to say that it could always be worse. And, you know, yeah, you're trapped at home, you're binging Netflix, you know, you're using your surplus of toilet paper, you're trying to find new things if your store is out. I mean, you're like those stacks of takeout napkins from DoorDash or whatever the hell. But, nonetheless, could always be worse. And that's what these scenarios are here to tell you. And so, yeah, if you were, if you were Coffee or, if you're any of these characters, you would be very, very just hit hard to know that you weren't guilty. But, I mean, the interesting thing that at least 3 of these 4 stories do, Eyes of the Dragon makes it plain and clear who's actually at work here. But there's an essence of uncertainty as to if these people are innocent despite their proclamation of it in the other 3. And so, yeah, it's at least for a while, you know. But, yeah, that would be a horrible scenario, to be trapped in prison and seemingly without parole or potential of clearing your name and, you know, being found innocent and wrongfully accused. And, yeah, that's a very scary scenario to find yourself trapped within. And another, which my little brother, shout out to him, Johnny C. I don't think he watches this program really very often. He's told me he watches it here and there, but he borrowed my Audible because he has been sent home, similar to me, although he's working from home, whereas I'm trying to do as much freelance work as I can from home in the coming weeks before I can start supplementing my income once again with, you know, the other, you know, the other job. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but he's like, yo, man, you know, let me borrow your Audible login so I can listen to all your Stephen King books. And I'm like, okay, cool. Although I must give a shout out to Scribd.com, because Scribd, and they don't sponsor this show, but Scribd is essentially the Netflix of audiobooks, and for $8.99 a month you can stream every single Stephen King book. They have pretty much every single one on there. So you can start streaming one if you're not feeling it. You know, if you're not feeling Bag of Bones like I didn't feel Bag of Bones, then you can jump and you can start listening to The Outsider. Or if you're like, I want to go classic, you can go listen to Pet Sematary or Salem's Lot. And Salem's Lot was one that I thought about referencing, and I guess I have to at least mention it since somebody's going to be like, hey, why can't you mention being trapped in a town that's slowly, you know, becoming overrun with vampires? Well, there's a lot of people, especially in the miniseries and stuff, and presumably in the town, that just leave, you know, when they start to realize things are amiss. So they're not necessarily trapped, so to speak. It's not like these vampires are holding people hostage or anything of that nature or against their will. They're just slowly turning people. So that was why, just to say that, just saying, you know, that term that everyone's so fond of, that, yeah, that's why Salem's Lot isn't being given its due, so to speak, here. And there's my justification. But so my little brother just got done listening to Desperation. He wasn't super familiar with it, and I was just like, yeah, man, it's essentially you're trapped in a deserted town besieged by a body-jumping ancient evil. And it's one of King's few stories that takes place out of Maine. You know, this obviously taking place in a remote area of Desperation, Nevada. And just, could you imagine you're just driving down the highway and a very creepy looking sheriff who, even though a lot of people don't like the Mick Garris adaptation, you know, I think that, you know, Hellboy, Mr. Ron Perlman, who plays this, well, the first body that Tack is at least in before, you know, so there's this ancient evil very similar to, like, you know, Pennywise / you know, Bob Gray, whatever, you know, that ancient evil that's in Derry is a very similar variety of it is also in Desperation, and it goes all the way back to these, you know, abused Chinese miners, and there's a whole deep, you know, backstory and history and stuff like that. But you're driving down the highway, and this sheriff pulls you over and plants drugs on you and throws you in this jail in this pretty much completely deserted, abandoned town. He's like the only person who's left there. And then he just slowly starts taking more and more people into custody, and there's like there's body jumping, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. But could you imagine, you know, like a cop plants drugs on your persons in this vehicle and then just jails you, and then later on they're besieged in like this theater and just all this different stuff. Desperation is definitely, it lives up to its name with just how desperate the characters are with this trapped situation that they find themselves in. You know, our author, we've got Cynthia, who was previously in Rose Matters. She gets a bigger role here. Desperation is one that I haven't revisited in a hot minute, but I know, you know, lots of people love it, including my little brother who just got done with it, Rob Corddry, who I know is a fan of this one. And I guess this is a good time to segue very, very briefly and interlude into the Bachman books, because of the fact that all but two, I'd say, of the Bachman books are, you know, dealing with essences of being trapped. You know, I mean, maybe the least of which being our protagonist in Roadwork, because he's essentially trapped in his home as they're trying to, well, he's trapped in his home of his own volition, because they're trying to put this freeway through his neighborhood and he won't sell his home, and so he's like boarded up in his home, trapped there, trying to make this statement because they're not going to destroy his home against his will with him in it, and so he's making this statement. That's just a really sad book, and I'm really, really looking forward to see what Andy and Barbara, whenever we're able to start making movies and TV shows again. That's all I can really say. But, I mean, in Rage, you know, you're trapped in a classroom being held hostage by a demented student, you know, who's armed. And then in The Long Walk and The Running Man, obviously, you know, even if you're trapped of your own volition, like you chose to be trapped in these death game scenarios, you know, which is what The Running Man, and to a lesser degree with kids, and not trying to directly kill each other, you know, in The Long Walk, but our main peeps, you know, in both of those are still trapped within this situation, even if they brought it upon themselves to a degree. But the reason I go from Desperation right into this is because The Regulators is another trapped. You're trapped in an Ohio neighborhood with these crazy robotic, like, you know, it's somewhere between like Cowboys and Transformers, these motocorps that have overrun your neighborhood and are brutally killing people everywhere. So you're trapped in your suburban home, and, you know, you're trying desperately to make some means of escape, and yet there is unflinching death at every turn practically, and there's this gifted young boy. And Regulators is really good, and it's the twinning, you know, whatever, book to Desperation, where you've got a lot of the same characters from that book that they have. It's like alternate versions of them in this different place, in this, you know, different level of the tower, so to speak. And there's a lot that survive in one that get killed in the other, and vice versa. Characters have a few different traits in some cases, but a lot of similarities, you know, being that whole twin aspect. And so I need to do a, you know, 1-2 punch and revisit those, because they're both really, really good. But now we are on to the second half of our list, peeps, and that is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. You're trapped, lost as a young girl in the woods while being stalked by a mysterious creature. Yeah, I remember being in upstate New York when I was a really little kid, visiting my grandma and grandpa. So I had my yaya and papa, that was my dad's parents, and then I had my grandma and grandpa, you know, my Scotch-Irish grandparents, and they were in upstate New York. That's where my mother grew up. And I remember one particular instance when I was really, really young, where I just wandered off into the woods, because they were in upstate and they were just right next to this forest, and I started just wandering around and I got lost, and I started screaming and crying, and eventually my mother found me. But for those 10, 15 minutes, whatever it was, the sheer panic, some of the most, I don't know, like legitimate that I had ever felt up to that point in my life, was so frightening. And I mean, just the scenario in this, while, you know, it's, you know, not necessarily trapped, but being lost in the woods, you feel trapped, you know. And I mean, life has teeth, as the book is opening up with. And, you know, that's a video that I'm putting together for the near future, is best opening lines. And The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon has one of the absolute best about, you know, you eventually realize life has teeth that are sharp and all this other stuff, and they eventually bite. And so really, really good stuff there. Now, next up, Dreamcatcher, I have gone on record to say, is quite likely my least favorite Stephen King long novel. It was written when he was recovering from his injury, shorthand. It's a very dark, depressing novel, but it's also very long and drawn out and borrows a lot of ideas from other ones. I just didn't find it as inspired. But doesn't mean that a scenario that happens within this, isn't absolutely frightening. And so that's trapped as a prisoner in your own mind because your body's been taken over. And that's what happens, in both Dreamcatcher and in Song of Susanna, where, your body, you're still like cognizant of things, like you're still up in there, and it's almost like, you're just a passenger as opposed to a driver, and I guess you could even tie this in with Dark Tower 2 to a degree, although in that case, in Drawing of the Three, of course, Roland was jumping into other people's bodies, being trapped in those bodies and being able to take over at will and so on and so forth. So little bit different, but I mean, when Mia takes over Susanna and all of that different stuff is going down in Song of Susanna, it's some of the more interesting bits in my estimation in 5 and 6, and to a degree when it's finally resolved in 7 and stuff. And I mean, when Mr. Gray takes over Homie's body in Dreamcatcher, and he's just like stuck in this huge, vast, like, I don't know, very similar to what we saw Flanagan do in Dr. Sleep, when Rose goes into, Abra's mind and stuff, and there's just all of that, and vice versa, where there's just like all of these different, just shelves and shelves of information. It's almost like this huge, like, Library of Congress type situation, but yet, you're trapped there and you can't get out. So it's an idea that, just being possessed, being like a pod person of sorts, and just how cognizant you in there still could be, and just seeing everything else happening. That's a frightening scenario for me. So, and then there's a couple just, I guess, more honorable mentions of sorts here. From a Buick 8, I feel like you would have an essence of being trapped if you had been working for decades in the presence of a vehicle that's pretty much an unkillable evil. So essentially, you're working in these police barracks, and there's this vehicle that has been in this adjacent garage for the longest time, adjacent garage for the longest time, and like there has been efforts to destroy it or discussion about it and stuff like that, but you almost feel trapped because you can't, because you worry it's some sort of like checks and balance sort of thing between worlds, keeping, almost like if you would destroy it, it would be like breaking down a door sort of thing, and who knows what sort of crazed Lovecraftian creatures could come out of the other side. So yeah, that would be an essence of feeling just a wee bit trapped in my estimation, and so that's why just honorably, from a Buick 8 comes to mind. Another one would probably be Sleeping Beauties, and you're trapped in a world without women because of the fact that, we have to try to figure out how to exist, if we can exist without those that we procreate with, and so that would probably be kind of a trapped feeling, even if it's not, to quite the same bunker mentality that a lot of people would think. And so, yes, that's where I'm down to our last couple picks here, and Cell is another one where you're trapped in a world, and I did discuss this for the Apocalyptic Tales, but I do really just profoundly think about, especially when they're trapped at the university with the professor and everything, and they're just kind of besieged by these rage zombies and stuff that, they're all around, and then they congregate at the football field, and just that whole beat is great. But yes, when it's really interesting, especially some of the discussion about herd mentality and stuff that goes down while they're trapped in there. And there's a couple different instances in that book where they're besieged, and you're trapped in a world that is overrun by these people who have gone nuts from the pulse. And very similar to, as I've mentioned before, George Romero's The Crazies. May he rest peacefully. We love you, Georgie. And now we're to our last official pick, and this is one that actually holds a little bit of similarity to Firestarter, but imagine if you were trapped as an experimental government test subject because of the fact that you have these inherent abilities, whether they're, I don't know. It's essentially, imagine X-Men with kids in tow. Imagine Stranger Things to a degree, and what was going down with 11. That's essentially what you've got in the Institute, and you have a terrific cast of kids that are all trapped in this frightening scenario and just being viciously experimented on to see what type of ability that they have and all this stuff. The Institute is King's most recent just addition and just different spin, I suppose, on being trapped against your will in a scary situation. And then I have to give just a quick little lightning round to the Dark Tower, obviously, because there's a few specific scenarios in those books where, in the Gunslinger, when Jake and Roland are trapped trying to get through this cave and find their way out, and you're surrounded by slow mutants and everything that goes down there. I think that's a creepy situation. Drawing of the three being trapped in a few different bodies, as I mentioned already, and then being trapped below Lud in the wastelands. That's a scary situation, when Thrasher's got Jake and he's just like pulling him through this crazy maze that is below this city that you're already kind of trapped in by these two warring factions and stuff. And then also when they're trapped on Blaine, they think they find their way, they've finally found their way out to Topeka, and then they're trapped with this crazy maniacal monorail, Blaine the Pain, and the game of riddles and all this other stuff. That's another very scary situation of feeling trapped and isolated with no just definitive means of escape that I find pretty creepy. And then obviously imagine being a breaker in Devar Toy, or Devar Toy, whatever. You're in Thunderclap and you are being forced to use your psychic abilities to break beams to eventually break down and destroy the Dark Tower that holds all of existence together in every universe, in every corresponding world, every adjacent bit. Imagine the linchpin that if that was, pulled, if that was somehow all of those beams that support it were broken, tower falls, linchpin is pulled, all of existence destroyed into just utter chaos. That was what the Crimson King was trying to do, man, and that's what those breakers, like Shimi, like Brodigan, those characters that we had met, Dinky, from Everything's Eventual. Imagine being trapped and having to do that, and after you're trapped and you're all sucked up and used up, you are just thrown out roots, as you find out in Rules of the Kala. So, but for me, maybe the most frightening scenario is probably what Roland encounters as a young man in Little Sisters of Eluria, because imagine that you get essentially injured and you are taken in to be, cared for, but turns out you're actually being cared for by a coven of vampire nuns, and you talk to your, bunkmate or whatever, and they basically give you the score about what's really going on there, and your only means for escape from this trap where you were being held hostage is this vampire, like nurse nun, whatever, that has taken a liking to you. That's the predicament that Roland finds himself in, and if you have never read, Little Sisters of Eluria, it is an often forgotten Dark Tower story. It's collected in Everything's Eventual, but Marvel Comics also did an awesome representation of it in the visual form. So that's going to do it, everybody, for the longer form. This is for the novel edition of Hail to Stephen King, Trapped Tales. So I will also be doing, as I said, a shorts companion video of this, and that's where you'll see some of your favorites probably, Children of the Corn, The Raft, even some lesser known ones like, The End of the Whole Mess and Rainy Season and 1408. And so there's going to be a lot of fun ones to discuss in brief in that video when it comes next week. But until then, I extend a grande gracias, everyone, and, good luck writing it out if you are just pretty much holed up in your home. It's happening to a lot of us, myself included. And yes, I've been Jaime Fuego, just to remind you there. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, where I have my own personal channel that's going to be seeing a big influx of content. It's called Infuegotainment, so either youtube.com/Jaime Fuego, or you can just search Infuegotainment. And yeah, just put up some more Star Wars Clone Wars Legacy coverage. So I read Star Wars Dark Disciple, which is about some unused scripts from Star Wars The Clone Wars and giving a nice just kind of end story and closure for the character Ventress that I was a big fan of. Got some boss in there and still all of your standards like, Obi-Wan and Anakin and stuff. It's a terrific book. Audiobook is awesome. Some more coverage of the 7th season. Did Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir recently. And also reviewed Onward. That was the last, non-horror film that I was able to see in theaters. And the last horror film that we were able to see here on the horror show, which if you haven't liked, shared, subscribed, porfa y gracias, get to it and share this video, like it, all that good stuff. It's greatly appreciated. But The Hunt was the most recent one that we got to go to theaters to check out, and you can look forward to, that review is up. What the hell am I saying? And it's also on VOD now too, because of the fact that theaters are not in existence right now, and so they're bringing stuff home early, although it's like $20 to even rent it, not to buy it. These are weird times, everybody. It's a weird world, as I think that's my 3rd time saying it in this review, but we're all rolling with the punches, hanging in there. So also to remind you, Hail to Stephen King, the Facebook group, that's where everybody comes together for palaver. We do a Freak Out Friday where we allow you to keep it, within the realm of, just kind-hearted discussion, but we go away from the King clan at least for one day. And there is always a book of the month, and the book of the month here for March is none other than On Writing, which is Cy King's autobiography / just instructional tool giving advice to just either aspiring new writers or those who are trying to hop back on the saddle or just refine their skills, that they have been working with for quite some time. So I've been Fuego. Y'all have been awesome, and I'm so just very blessed and thankful to have had all of you, listening to my ramblings for all of these years. It is so supremely appreciated. So, danke, arigato, merci, thank you, gracias so very much. And until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, I shall say hasta luego, sin amigos, and constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you, and I am hopeful that we get to share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until that instance occurs, remember to stay scared, but really not that scared. It's going to be okay, everybody. But in the meantime, read Stephen King.